Amber. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing a book review. We are going to be reviewing Going Viral, A Socially Distant Love Story by Katie Cicatelli Cook. I don't know how to say the last name, sorry. And this is a book that is told during COVID. And during the early days of the pandemic, I remember like on the news, everyone was saying like, there's all these stories coming out. Write down, journal every day because one day we're gonna want to read your story because you're part of history and everything. And I never read any of that when it was coming out, because I just kind of was like, that's too much for me throughout the pandemic. I was just kind of trying to get through it. But once the pandemic ended, I didn't read any of the like literature that came out of that either. Well, it hasn't ended, but like got better. And then I saw this at a book fair at a school I used to work at. And so I picked it up. And I thought it would be a really interesting read. There's another book that she wrote as well that's taking place during COVID. It's called Quarantine, a Love Story. I might check that one out because I did really like this one. When I first started it, I felt like it was a little cheesy. It was a little like, okay, maybe too young for me. But I like young adult books, so I thought maybe with time and when if I kept reading it would be more interesting for me. And I reached a point in the book, I think it was like not even half, it was fairly early on, where I became rather hooked. I was like, okay, this is interesting. So this is a book about uh a girl. Her name is Claire. She ends up having what's like called a Babel, but it's like a Goodreads, not a Goodreads. What was that one website? A Wattpad kind of thing, where you like publish your stories and stuff, and people go to read it, like a blog too. And she never really uses it much. But when she finds out that she now has to socially distance, and not be going to school and hanging out with her girlfriend or her friends, like she kind of becomes addicted and immersed in like writing on this platform. And also she becomes very curious about the girl who lives on the other side of, because she has a fire escape and she's like on the second, third floor or whatever, and who lives across from her. And what she ends up writing about ends up being like this whole like of everything that's going on with this girl, this whole thing. And so that becomes something that ends up going viral, and it's all like about like her feelings towards it, how she's struggling with COVID, how she's figuring things out. And I think that I related to this book so much because exactly how she was freaking out and wanted to desperately have answers, that is exactly how I felt. And what I also appreciate from this book is that like you see literally the moment when they tell them, no, we need to social distance, go home. Like it was just like that. And I think for me it happened a little bit more gradually, where it wasn't just kind of like instantaneous like this. And I know in some places it was just like, go home, go and don't come out, go to your families, and that's it. But it was very interesting to see that how it all just kind of happened so quickly, and then how her thoughts started to progress, and how she was like just freaking out internally, and then how she felt about like missing school for a month that ended up turning into the rest of the year, that ended up turning into who knows how long. And I think that this book just kind of took me back to that time, which was kind of weird and kind of sad. And I was able to really like fully look back and process what I had gone through at that point. And so I resonate with this book on like a different level. Because after like things got better, like they got better, and you kind of took a breath of like fresh air and relief, and you didn't want to think back to that time. And I think that in reading this, it gave me like this new perspective. I'm like, oh my god, like that's exactly how I was acting and like what I was thinking. Um so Claire has a girlfriend. Her girlfriend is named Vanessa, and her and Vanessa from the beginning I feel like are two completely different individuals. Vanessa feels like that person, like she has it all together and everything, and Claire just kind of seems like shy and like just kind of dating Vanessa just to kind of like have somewhat of a like a purpose, and also because she's like the cool girl, and like it just feels like their dynamic is very strange. And it also feels like Vanessa really gaslights and like downplays Claire's like feelings, her emotions, and I hated that. I'm like, you are don't seem like a good person. Like, I mean, I think that your intentions maybe might be well sometimes, but you don't exactly talk to your girlfriend like you care about her. You're like talking to her like she's a chore. And so that very early on, that personality, I was just kind of like, I already know where this is going. Um, they are not going to work out, and I was thoroughly surprised when they did, because at the end I feel like we should have re-examined this whole relationship. Because well, Claire is the one that's freaking out, that's like, I need some answers, I aren't you worried about this and that, like, and then Vanessa is like, oh well, we can make bread and we can do this, and um we can spend family time together. And like, it's just, I related to Claire so much in the fact that her family is just very dorky, they're nerdy, they've got their own stuff going on, and they don't always do things together and everything. And I felt like throughout the pandemic, I was very much the person who I'm like, I'm seeing all these people like do all these things and make stuff and everything. And I wanted to be that person, but I just was not. And to see these two different individuals, I'm not saying that it was bad to do that, like those things, do whatever worked for you, but it really, like, if you didn't find that, I guess, that niche that like helped you out throughout the pandemic, you were going through things on another psychological level. And so I feel like in them being too different with that, like the pandemic really like tested people and tested couples. And I feel like like in the beginning they were so different as was, and this only like caused things to be worse. And the way that she talked to her, I think, was so demeaning that I was like, this is not working out. And she would like basically say, well, you should do this, you should do that, why aren't you doing this, like, I don't understand why you're freaking out so much. It wasn't like she was even trying to understand the person. And if you have something that works for you and it's not working for your partner, like, and they're going through something, like, talk to them, like, try to maybe figure things out, or like, try to understand them on their level, because if something's working for you, it's not going to work for them. And this is like a global crisis right now. Like, you have to cut her some slack. But the way you're talking to her is just not helping her, and this is why you're always arguing. So back and forth arguing, and her just being like, oh, and my whole family thinks that you're overreacting. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, okay. And then in the end, when she says, oh, that was my way of coping, yeah, I understand that was your way of coping, but you didn't need to talk to your girlfriend like that. She's like, I was freaking out and I was doing it, because I loved you. Okay, I can understand, because at one point, and still in many things, I'm the type of person where it's like, you should do this. Like, she was telling her girlfriend, oh, like, look into a colleges like an hour a day. Like, okay, understandable. But I think that she did not understand her girlfriend enough to know that she was like freaking out about the idea of college and have that conversation. I think, I had to learn to be like, okay, we if this is going to work between us, we need to communicate and see why you're not doing this, or why you don't like this, or like how am I talking to you that's making you feel a certain way. But it was just kind of like they left it at that. And instead of like them learning something from it, it was just like, oh, I did this because I loved you. And so I'm going to continue doing it. And I'm like, that's not okay. That's not how Claire communicates. Like, um, so I just felt like that was just a lot. And for them to end up like working out in the end, and them just settling on the fact like I do all this stuff cuz I love you, and I'm like sorry, but you should not forgive her. Like, can't you see why she was mentally cheating on you? You were not being a good person communicating with your girlfriend. Even if you loved her, you did not really show it. And then she was telling Claire that she didn't know how to communicate. And okay, Claire did not know how to communicate, but she's a very shy person, everything. And Vanessa, like, she was so right when she said, why didn't you ask me about this? Why didn't you ask me about that? And for Vanessa to say, who tells you when you need something? Who, how does she phrase it? Basically telling Claire, who do you go to when you need something? Who tells you that you need something, I guess? And Claire's like, my parents? And Claire is just so like innocent, and like I completely like in that moment I was like, yes. um because for my whole life too, it was just like my parents. And then she's like, no, you're supposed to be the one to talk about your needs and your wants. And I'm like, yes, but that doesn't really go with what we're saying here. She needed you to recognize things about her that showed your interest in her. Like, she's not going to say, why don't you look at this? And then you're like, oh, I'm sorry, let me look at that. Because then, like, you have to tell the person, and then it's weird. Like, no. And so she wanted Claire to be like, I want you to read my writing. I want you to look at my art. And it's like, no, you as her girlfriend should be like, hey, what are you drawing? Like, she is completely 100% right in that. I'm sorry. That is just like, no. And so for her to like really like belittle her and gaslight her in that moment, I was just like, no, we should dump her right now. And instead she was like, oh no, you're right. And I'm like, no, honey, she not right. No. Like, and the fact that Sadie ended up being like this kind of like rude, like, she was just ugh at the end. Like, she ended up being this kind of like safe haven for Claire to go to and like talk, and she opened up to her. And yes, there were like signs and maybe mixed signals, okay, but like for Sadie not to acknowledge that. And I love when Claire said in her like last Babel post, um I was like mistaken, or she led me to believe. Yes, she led you to believe. This girl literally like was playing games with you, because she was just like, she called you babe or whatever, honey. And I'm like, come on. No. Like, that's like, no. Um and then for her to say like, oh, you were just thinking this and you were trying to control my life and blah blah. It's like, okay, yeah, like Claire made a mistake putting it out there, but you don't need to like act like that with her. Like, you forget you. And then she ends up with Vanessa, and I'm just like, none of these people are good. Just learn something and move on with your life, because you're a better person than both these people. So yeah, so her posts go viral. Everyone wants to know about like, because she sees her from across the way, and she like draws pictures of her and ends up having her phone number and talking to her, and they end up like really getting each other. And then it kind of reminds me of like The whole, you're talking to someone over the phone and they end up being completely different in person. That's exactly what Sadie felt like. And I felt like she was like a lesson in that way. And um she writes about like these interactions, and she doesn't mean for them to go viral. At first it was just like a prompt that she followed to just kind of distract herself, and then it just kind of became an escape for her. And then these people's comments, I guess it kind of made her feel like she had someone, uh besides like Sadie and throughout the pandemic, and she was like kind of seeking acceptance within her family as well, and like figuring things out and everything, because she was this shy introverted person. And then when like it just kind of was hard for her not to get sucked into that, and yeah, it was a mistake, but like, and then when people started like commenting that she was fake and this and that, and you just saw how horrible the world can be sometimes. And then like with the pandemic, they were just kind of like outputting their hate onto this poor girl, and she was trying to please not only herself but these people. um so I thought, all in all, it was a pretty good book, except for like the whole relationship aspect at the end and her forgiving her, because that was not okay. But her Vanessa showing up at the apartment saying come downstairs and like little letters was kind of cute, but there is no inclination that I thought like Vanessa was gonna do something like that, and like if it's gonna go well after that. And then there was only one part when she said, oh, I think I need to communicate a little bit more, but it was mainly she was just putting it on Claire, and I just don't think that was fair. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see y'all soon. Bye.